Howdy, howdy. So this is a new reading, a short story called Therapy, published in the Virginia Normal. So thanks to that journal for publishing this. Fairly short little story. So here we go. And how does that make you feel? Simone says, feeling her cheeks redden as they do every time she asks this stupid, terrible, non-specific question, like mentioning the weather when you get caught in a conversation with an awkward acquaintance. But her patients, having grown up watching television shows and movies where all therapists ask, expect and find solace in it. As soon as the words are out of Simone's mouth, Kathleen is off and running, dithering about her dead first husband and her ex second husband and her now estranged third husband, waving her hands in the air like splotchy, fatty pancakes from her place on the couch. Another thing that makes patients comfortable. Lying and staring at the ceiling, preferably from the non comfort of a patent leather sofa too narrow and short to hold a real human body. Simone loses track of what Kathleen is saying, not just because she's heard it during every single one of their sessions, but because she is, admittedly, not paying attention, gazing instead at the three high windows along the wall, imagining herself scaling her desk, hauling herself through, and flying. Ever since the first time, 2 months after Whit died, when she fell off the roof and rather than splattering on the ground, found herself swooping like she was on an invisible roller coaster, taking flight is all Simone can think about. Simone was bent on the roof, kneeling on the psoriatic shingles scraping against her skin, pulling off the Christmas lights Whit had strung up. They trailed around the window frames, spindled up the columns, and draped across the roofline, outlining the angles and gutters of their sprawling bungalow. She hated ladders, ever since she'd taken a spill as a 9-year-old when her father had let her waddle up one to top the Christmas tree with a musty angel with yellow string for hair. The ladder had wobbled and she had lost her balance and down she'd gone, right into the tree, scraping both her arms and legs, pulling ornaments and the lights with her. A nasty bruised cut on her left knee went from blood red to green to purple to finally a crusty yellow over the next several weeks, drying out in the winter air like meat salted into jerky. So instead of setting up the tall metal ladder and plucking off a section of lights, then climbing down and moving the ladder to unhook another strip, Simone sucked in her gut, clamped her jaw, and scrambled up the one time and planted herself on the roof. But then, as she bunny hopped across the sloped roof, she caught her foot on what must have been a moldy old shingle, rotted from the battery of rain and hail of the recent tropical summer, and she slipped. Green wired lights looped over her forearm and tumbled headfirst without even enough time to think, well, this is it. But that wasn't it. Instead of falling into a bloody crumple in the bushes, Simone found herself floating, arms out like the bolted wings of an airplane. The sensation was exactly like that of every dream she'd ever had of flying, her stomach flopping with a rush of pleasant nausea. She swooped low to the ground, then back up, and she dove in waves just like that, nose and stretched smile leading the way until she was across the cul-de-sac in her neighbor's snow-spattered yard, landing with an elegant poof in the white fluff, Christmas lights unfurling behind her like a twinkling banner. She can still remember the last words of the voicemail she left him. Go to hell and please never come back. Her voice was the level, calm tone she used with patients when their own voices pitched and bunched when they were about to tumble over an emotional ledge. Simone remembers that above all else. She didn't scream into the phone, didn't sob. She simply dialed his number, knowing his flight was still in the air and that he wouldn't answer, and told him to never come back. Whit must have wanted her to find the printouts. He wouldn't have left the photographs on his desk otherwise. Every year he attended a conference in San Diego, and Simone cleaned up his tornado of an office. Whit was an avid reader, and he stacked his books on the edge of his bookshelves as he read them, never filing them in tidy upright lines. Simone reorganized everything, emptying shelf after shelf and shuffling the books into alphabetized stacks that covered the room like a small city. Then she tidied the spilled matter of his professional life strewn across his desk, student papers, lecture notes, dog-eared articles, so that everything was back in enough order that he could manage for another 12 months. He always acted astonished at her one gesture of housewifery, deeply grateful, planting a kiss on her cheek after staring at the clean office with wide eyes and a gaping smile. He would buy her flowers, take her to a nice dinner that was followed by champagne and a tender extended session of making love, where she ran her hands through his thick salt and pepper hair and he clutched at her back and trickled his fingertips along the knobs of her spine. But the last time, staring up at her, hardly hidden beneath the draft of a syllabus, 3 photographs of a naked woman, her body reflected in a long mirror, one of her blowing a kiss, a second with her hands over her vulva, a third of her squatting down with her legs wide open to feature a swath of curly, well-manicured pubic hair. Simone knew they weren't porn, random photographs Whit had pulled from the internet. No, this was something real, something directed at him, from this woman staring into the grainy camera lens with a pinched, focused look in her eyes, the look of knowing who would be staring back. Simone could have called then, screamed at him, destroyed the library, heaved all of his books, the precious first editions, the graded papers, everything into seeping piles that she might light on fire and watch dissemble into black specks. Instead, she tidied the room as usual and waited. Whit came home, reacting as normal. They fucked that night. For the first time, she thought of it as that way. She thought of it that way. Fucking. Hard, savage, and angry. She gritted her teeth and pulled his hair and clawed at his skin until the surface broke. They grunted and stared at one another, hips grinding against one another, both knowing that the other knew what neither would say. She slept with a raw ache between her legs, and he turned his back to her, snoring like a razored saw cutting across a lead pipe. Ineffective, grinding, painful. They spent their next year in icy togetherness, dinners buffered by cheap gin and tonics, weekends filled with outings to wine tastings and the movies. They both extended their workdays, he on campus and she at her downtown office, letting night creep in through their windows. When they went to parties, they split off the second they were through the door, both too drunk to drive home by the end, but neither caring enough to call a cab. Simone waited a year to make her phone call. She listened to his recorded message and left her own, her voice cool. But then the crash. Engine failure, some 1 in a million malfunction that sent the plane sputtering down somewhere near Reno. Simone would never know whether she'd called before or after Whit was nothing but wrecked ash and charred skin, her words lost, trapped in whatever limbo undeliverable message disappeared to, voice echoing in some empty, ill-defined space that lifted the sound into an invisible black cavity. The night before the funeral, she called her in-laws. Rita and Arnold were already in their 70s. Whit had been a high-risk, late-in-life pregnancy, something he bragged about. Simone had laughed when he first told her, some 6 or 7 dates in, and said there must be some psychological issues bouncing around between his temples that explained his pride in being a danger even in utero. "Oh, Simone," Rita moaned into the phone, "we're still in such shock." A week had passed. Simone couldn't remember how she'd learned of the crash. This, of all things, was the one blurry spot. Had she seen it on the news? Had Rita called? Some anonymous voice from the authorities? The airline? Did airlines make those kinds of calls? "We're sorry to inform you that our plane killed your husband." Simone pulled in a deep breath. "Look," she said, and then told them. "He was cheating. I found photos." Silence on the line, and then deeper sobbing. "I'm not going to tell anyone, but I want you to know why I won't be crying tomorrow." And she didn't cry. She sat in the first row of chairs next to Rita, who gripped Simone's hand while she dabbed at her cheeks, pushing up her wire-rimmed glasses with her clenched fist. Simone could feel Rita glancing at her, but she refused to meet her mother-in-law's gaze, focusing instead on the closed casket. Simone wondered what in the world was inside. The bodies had been burned up to almost nothing recognizable, and she wasn't even sure there was actually a body to bury. She wanted to walk up and throw the casket open and compare the blackened remains inside to the blown-up photograph of Whit propped on an easel next to the coffin. He was photogenic, with a broad, white smile and straight teeth, half-moon dimples. His jawline could cut diamonds. After the service, Simone scanned the crowd, wondering if the woman in the photographs had snuck in, sat in the back perhaps, arriving a few minutes late. But Simone saw no one who looked like her. What would she say, anyway? Her friends wonder why she seems all right, why she doesn't cry or take a vacation or drink wine by the bottle. Simone dives into her work, taking on a dozen new clients and booking extra appointments each day. Kathleen shows up 3 times a week, talking to the ceiling while Simone stares out the window. Her receptionist wonders if Simone should talk to someone herself, a limp joke meant to cut tension, but Simone blinks and ignores her. She has told no one else about the pictures or the voicemail, and certainly not the flying. Simone is careful. She only flies at night, 2 or 3 in the morning, when the sky is mascara black and the street lights have blinked off. She climbs to the roof and leaps from the same spot, superstitious that it might be the only place that works. She dives and rises, sucks in the streaming air through her nostrils, and tells herself that Whit's death is not her fault. She knows it is not her fault. Guilt tries to seep in, but she seals herself up like a bank vault, tells herself that the voicemail, the chill in her words, were incidental to the crash. She could not have predicted it, and she did not condemn Whit to death. Why, she wonders, do people blame themselves for things they had no control over? What kind of hubris moves them to think they control so much of anything? She wonders, as she dips, if Wit felt the same flip of the stomach as he tumbled toward the earth. But then she whips up and rises. Unlike him, she is able to turn her fall around. She widens her arms, and the breeze cuts over her skin. Air pulls and twills under her floating belly and breasts. Hair whips past her eyes. Her fingertips cut through the breeze rising from below, legs dragged by nothing. This is what she feels. What else can there be? The end.